نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعني وإياكم بالآيات وذكر الحكيم أستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المؤمنين واستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. This is your brother in Islam, Muhammad bin Arshad, and inshallah tonight again we will discuss a very important question, and this is a question about holding a mushaf, holding a copy of the Quran in the Taraweeh prayer. So the question is, can I read from the Quran? Can I hold the Quran and look at the Quran in my Taraweeh prayers while I'm performing my Taraweeh prayers? The answer of this question is basically quite clear, but by the way, we need to understand something before we understand the answer of this question. First and foremost, this question is about Taraweeh prayers. So remember that Taraweeh prayers is a nafil prayer, it's a sunnah prayer, and it's not a fard prayer, because there are certain flexibilities that are afforded to sunnah or nafil prayers, but they are not afforded to fard prayers. So according to all the scholars, according all schools of Islamic law, holding a Quran and reading from the mushaf in the fard prayer is not permissible. But in the nafil prayer, in the sunnah prayer, again we need to understand that this is a matter which is disagreed upon by the jurists of the Sunni schools of Islamic law. But before I tell you about any of the Sunni schools, first let me share with you the hadith of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. And this is a hadith taken from Sahih al-Bukhari. And it's an athar from Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha that she would command her freed slave Zakwan to lead them in prayers. And Zakwan, because he was not a hafiz, he would read from the mushaf. This is in Sahih al-Bukhari. Kana yaqra'u min al-mushaf. He would read from the mushaf. This is a very clear hadith. This is an explicit hadith, as explicit as you can get, and this is from Sahih al-Bukhari. Even though it's a mu'allaq hadith, those of you who know about these terminologies or who are interested in knowing what kind of hadith is this, it's a mu'allaq form of hadith, but it reaches the level of Hasan. Again, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha would command one of her freed slaves, one of her mawla, Zakwan, to lead them in the prayers in the nights of Ramadan. So Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, this is after the demise of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha would not go to Masjid al-Nabi to read her Taraweeh prayers. She would stay at her home and she would pray in her home. So she would command one of her freed slaves, who happened to be her servant, who happened to be a person who used to serve her on daily basis. She would command her to lead them in the prayers in the nights of Ramadan, meaning Taraweeh prayers. Because he was not a hafiz, he would read it from the mushaf, and this is a hadith from Sahih al-Bukhari. Another famous scholar by the name of Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri rahmatullah alayh, who died in 129 Hijrah. He is one of the greatest scholars, if not the greatest scholar of Tabi'un. This is the generation he is from. So remember, the generation that lives with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the generation of Sahaba, this is called the generation of Sahaba. That's the first generation, the generation of the companions of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The generation that came after Sahaba, they are called Tabi'un, and the generation that came after Tabi'un, they are called Tabi'un. So two generations after the demise of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this person is he from? This alim is he from? He's one of the greatest alim of this ummah, Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri rahmatullah alayh. One time he was asked about this issue, that Imam, what is your opinion about a person who reads from the mushaf in his nafil prayers, in his Taraweeh prayers, in the nights of the month of Ramadan? And remember, Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri rahmatullah alayh, he met many of the sons of the Sahaba and many of the students of the Sahaba, many main of the students of the Sahaba. So he said to him, the one who asked him this question, he answered, Kana khiyaruna yaqra'una fil mushaf. He said that the best amongst us, meaning the best of the people that I have met in my life, the best amongst us, we would read from the mushaf. I remember that the best among us would read from the mushaf. Now again, Imam Ibn Shihab az-Zuhri rahmatullah alayhi, he's quite clear about it, that this was a very well accepted practice, and this was a very common practice, that people in the nights of Ramadan, when they would lead the prayers, they would have mushaf in their hands, or they would read from the mushaf. Now Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi, the position of Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi, in Mudawwanatul Kubra of Samhun, Imam Samhun was the student of Imam Malik. Mudawwanatul Kubra is one of the earliest books of the fiqh, of Imam Malik fiqh, of Maliki fiqh. His student asked, it was written by his student, Imam Malik's student. So Imam Malik's student, Imam Samhun, he asked Imam Malik about this issue. And Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi, there is no harm in carrying the mushaf for the imam for the nafal prayer. Again, I will emphasize the fact, this is about nafal prayer. Nobody said that you can do it in the fard prayer. Not for the Isha prayer, not for Dhuhr prayer, not for the mandatory prayers. In the nafal prayer, he said there is no harm for the imam to carry the mushaf when he leads the prayer. Nafal prayers, Taraweeh prayers in the night of the month of Ramadan. So Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi, this is his standard position, and he's quite explicit about it. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, he was asked about the same question, and he said, La ba'sa an yusalli an-nasa bil qiyam wa huwa yanzuru fil mushaf. There is no problem, there is no harm whatsoever. He said there is no problem, there is no harm whatsoever for the imam to carry the mushaf. He's leading people in Taraweeh prayers in the month of Ramadan, Nafal prayers, Taraweeh prayers in the month of Ramadan, and he's looking at the mushaf. He said there is no problem whatsoever. And by the way, again, I forgot to mention, if you guys have any question with regards to this issue, inshallah, feel free to post that question in the comment section. Inshallah, I will try to answer them towards the end. So this is Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. Now Allama Nawawi rahmatullah alayhi, in his book Majmu'u, again, I've mentioned Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi, and he was explicit about it. I mentioned Imam Ahmad Hanbal bin rahmatullah alayhi, and he was explicit about it. Now Allama Nawawi rahmatullah alayhi, he's one of the greatest scholars of Shafi'i mazhab. He's one of the greatest scholars of Shafi'i fiqh from the medieval times. So in his book Majmu'u, he said that if a person reads from the mushaf, if a person recites from the mushaf while he is in his Taraweeh prayers, in his Nafal prayers, in the nights of the month of Ramadan, irrespective of the fact that whether he's a Hafiz or not, whether he knows the Quran by heart or not, his salah is still valid. His salah is still valid. So again, Imam Shafi'i rahmatullah alayhi's follower, Allama Nawawi rahmatullah alayhi, one of the greatest Shafi'i scholars, he's saying it very explicitly that if you read from the mushaf, this will not invalidate your salah will remain valid. So you have Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, and Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi, all these three. And before I mention any of these three schools of Sunni Islamic law, I mentioned the hadith of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, our mother Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, and then I quoted the saying of Imam Ibn Shihab az-Zuhri rahmatullah alayh, that he said that, you know, the best among us, kana khayaruna yaqra'una fil mushaf. That, again, he's a well-learned scholar, and he's a well-traveled scholar. He lived in Medina, and he also lived in Damascus, and he's of the view that, you know, the best amongst us used to recite from the mushaf in our Taraweeh prayers. So this is something that the majority of the ummah agreed upon. However, I have left one school, and this school is strictest, is most strict when it comes to this issue. And we respect all schools of thoughts. We respect all schools of Sunni Islamic law. And you guys need to understand that there are four main schools, and there are some issues on which they have differences of opinion. But at the end of the day, we respect all of them. And the school that is left is the school that is most strict with this regard. And this is the school of Hanafi law that I personally follow. And Imam al-Kasani rahmatullah alayh, in his book Bada'i'us Sana'i, he said that Imam Abu Hanifa's position, by the way, just in order to make this discussion a little bit lighter, I have to tell you this. You know, Imam Kasani rahmatullah alayh, he died around 587 Hijrah. So he was one of the greatest students of Imam Samarqandi rahmatullah alayh. Now Imam Samarqandi, he had written a book about Hanafi fiqh, and since Imam Kasani rahmatullah alayh is one of his main students, in order to impress his teacher, he wrote another book, and that book is considered to be one of the greatest classical books of fiqh in Hanafi fiqh. And that book is called Bada'i Sana'i. So he wrote that book, and he presented that book to his teacher as a commentary of the book that he had written, that Imam Samarqandi had written. He presented his book as the commentary of that book. And Imam Samarqandi rahmatullah alayhi, he was so happy, and he was so impressed with his work that he accepted, and it became a joke for later Hanafi scholars, and it's a true story. He became so happy that he said to one of his main students that I will accept your book as a mahar for my daughter's hand in marriage to you. So he gave his daughter's hand in marriage to one of his main students, Imam Kasani, and what was the mahar? This book, Bada'i Sana'i, this book. This was a different time, and these were different types of mahar. I don't know if any of our sisters today would accept the mahar to be written as multi-volume book, Hanafi book fiqh, Allahul Musta'an, but I don't think that would be the case today. But this is a funny story about this book, Bada'i Sana'i, one of the greatest and the classical books of Hanafi fiqh, written by Imam al-Kasani rahmatullah alayh. So Imam al-Kasani rahmatullah alayh, he said that Imam Abu Hanifa's position on this matter is that if somebody reads from the Mus'haf, if somebody recites from the Mus'haf, his salah will become invalid. His salah would become batil. His salah would be considered null and voided. This is Imam Abu Hanifa's position. He was very explicit about it. And this is the standard position in the Hanafi fiqh. This is the standard position. In our books of fiqh, we call it mufta bihi qawl. Mufta bihi qawl means that the position on which we have a fatwa now. So that's why, generally speaking, my dear brothers and sisters in Islam, in Hanafi cultures, for example, in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, where people follow Hanafi fiqh, the concept of carrying a mushaf in the masjid in the month of Ramadan is almost alien to us. But in Shafi'i culture, in Maliki culture, in Hanbali culture, it is very common to find people in the month of Ramadan, in the nights of Ramadan, carrying the mushaf. And again, I'm not going to interfere with the intricacies of other mazahib, because I personally follow Hanafi mazhab, and I'm more familiar with the Hanafi mazhab, with the Hanafi school of thought. So that's why I want to let all the Hanafi followers know here that even though this is Imam Abu Hanifa's position, but two of his main disciples, two of his main students, Qadi Abu Yusuf rahmatullah alayh, Imam Abu Yusuf rahmatullah alayh, and Imam Muhammad bin Hassan Shaybani rahmatullah alayh, they both differed with their teacher, with their mentor, Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah alayh, on this issue. These two students are called Sahibain, the great students of Imam Abu Hanifa. They had a difference of opinion with Imam Abu Hanifa on this issue, and they said that if someone were to carry mushaf in his hand in nafal prayers in the month of Ramadan, in the nights of Ramadan, in Taraweeh prayers, his salah would not be invalid, his salah would not be batil. But they also said that it is makruh, it is not encouraged. And the Hanafi scholars, generally speaking, they were hesitant, and they are still hesitant to open this door. And they have given reasons for this ruling. They have given reasons why we hold this position. And one of the reasons is that when you are reading your salah and you are holding the mushaf in your hand, there is going to be lots of extra motion. There is going to be a lot of extra haraka, a lot of extra motion, because you will be holding the Quran and you will be turning the pages, and you will be doing a lot of stuff. So there will be a lot of extra haraka, and extra haraka can become a means of your salah becoming invalid, even in normal circumstances. If you make a lot of extra haraka, your salah will become invalid. So that's the first reason they give. The second reason they give, that there is an element of tashabbuh, of imitation of other religious rituals. So for example, in Christianity, when the priest comes or when the minister of religion comes and they offer their prayers, they have their books in their hands and they're reading from their books. So there is this tashabbuh here. Now I know some of you may feel or may think that, if nowadays we have these iPhones and we have these phones and we have these apps. So what if you were to carry a phone in your hand and you're reading from your phone, and you're not like reading like this and carrying, turning every page. You're reading on the phone and you're just flicking the pages, and this is not a lot of haraka. Or let's say another scenario, another example, another situation, just to get rid of this issue of haraka, just to come out of this issue of haraka. What if you were to have a stand in front of you and a huge Quran on that stand, and the Quran is open in front of you, and there is a page here and there is a page there, and you're reciting You're not doing any harakah. You're not doing any harakah, any motion whatsoever. You're reciting, and you're just looking at the page and you're reciting. You're looking at one page and you're reciting, and then you go into ruku and you come back up again, and then you look at this page and you recite, and then you go back into your ruku and you do your sajda, your at-tahiyyat, and after your taslim, you stand up, and then you move the page, you turn the page, and then you do the same thing. Now in your salah, you're not doing any harakah. So the first reason that Imam Abu Hanifa mentioned, it doesn't seem like a valid reason. And like I said before, I respect all the school of thought, but it's really important that we don't, oversimplify things. So when I was looking into this issue today, I've realized that in Durul Mukhtar, in Haskawi's Durul Mukhtar, Imam Ibn Abidin rahmatullah alayhi mentioned another reason. And that's a very valid reason, and that's a very strong reason. And he said the reason Imam Abu Hanifa feels that your salah will become invalid is because if you're reading from the Quran in your salah, it's like you are inspired by something that is outside of the salah. That's an external inspiration of the qira'ah, of the recitation of the Quran. And in order to make it easier for you, in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, people did not have the hard copies of the Quran. So if somebody wants to memorize the Quran in the olden days, if somebody wanted to memorize the Quran, they used to use this methodology that was called talaqqi. That methodology was called talaqqi. Talaqqi is that a teacher sits and his student sits in front of him and he recites the words of the Quran and he makes his student read the same words again and again and again and again and again and again until he memorizes that verse. And then the teacher will move on to the next words and he will recite the next words and he will make his student read the next words, and then this is how they would make people recite the Quran or memorize the Quran. Now when you are standing in your salah and you're reciting from the Quran, it is same as some person sitting outside of the salah giving you dictation, giving you talaqqi, telling you how to recite Quran. And according to, as far as my knowledge is concerned, according to Hanafi school of thought, if you are praying your salah, no matter what salah you are praying, you are performing your salah, you are reciting the Quran, you are an imam, and somebody who is about to come and join the salah, he's not the part of the salah, he's about to come and join the salah, about to come and join the jama'ah, he hears you reciting Quran and making some sort of mistake. So out loud, he corrects your mistake. He corrects your mistake. And if you correct your mistake because of what he tells you, or because of the person who is not inside of the salah, who is outside of the salah, and he tells you about your mistake, and you correct your mistake because of that person who is the external inspiration of your mistake, then your salah will become invalid. The person who is outside of the salah, if because of him you correct your mistake, your salah will become, because again this is an external inspiration. And it's called talaqqi. And because of that, Imam Abu Hanifa, he strongly holds the position, strongly holds the view that your salah will become valid, your salah will become batil, it will become null and voided. I know some of the modern Hanafi scholars nowadays, they are saying that look, this is the standard position, but given the circumstances that we are in, for example, in the light of COVID-19 and lockdown, and people will not be having an opportunity to read their Taraweeh prayers in Jama'ah, so they are of the view that if you want to follow Imam Abu Yusuf or Imam Muhammad rahmatullah alayhi and their position in this particular matter, then that's fine, it's okay, you can go ahead with that. But I still feel that we should be hesitant to open the door. That's my personal recommendation. I'm not imposing my view on anybody. That's my personal. The other three school of thoughts, they say that you can read from the Mus'haf even in normal circumstances. Even in normal circumstances, you can read from the Mus'haf. So what about, now, when you are in exceptional circumstances and in the light of given circumstances that we are in. I respect all school of thoughts, and I'm never going to criticize you for following any opinion that you want to follow. That's why I've given you, I know the congregation that comes to Iqra, they are mixed congregation and they come from different school of thoughts. So I'm never going to criticize if you're going to follow a standard position of a madhab, of a fiqh school, and if you remain consistent with that. That's the main point, if you remain consistent with that. However, my own personal recommendation is, and I always tell people about it, that for me, I personally feel the thing that matters to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the quality and not quantity. And if you're reciting from the Quran, and if you're struggling to recite, and all of your attention is on the words of the Quran, and you're not feeling your recitation, you're not feeling any spirituality, you're not getting anything out of it, then what's the point of having long qiyam? I understand that Taraweeh prayers, the whole meaning of Taraweeh prayer is to have a longer qiyam, is to have a longer standing position. I understand that. But at the same time, if you're reciting from the Quran and you're struggling to recite and you don't know how to recite, what's the next surah, what's the next ayah, and it's difficult for you. All of your attention is towards the recitation and looking at the Mus'haf and reciting from the Mus'haf, and if it distracts you and you're not able to have that kind of a focus and concentration in your salah, then I would personally request my brothers and sisters who are listening to me right now, please recite some surahs in the morning, memorize some surahs in the morning. Go on YouTube. There is a very beautiful reciter of the Quran, Imam Wasim Sharif. Listen to his recordings, whatever surah you want to memorize, listen to his recordings. He will explain the entire tajweed to you. You understand the rules of the tajweed, you memorize the surah. Then at night time, inshallah, you stand up and you memorize those surahs with proper tajweed. And even if in every salah you are repeating the same surah, but you are focusing on the tajweed and the rules and regulations, inshallah, this will become more impactful. Personally, it's more impactful for me. Personally, if I have something in front of me and I'm reading from it, it can become a source of distraction for me. So personally speaking, I would prefer that you memorize a certain portion of the Quran every single day, and then inshallah you will practice it in your qiyam every single night. But whatever position you want to follow, inshallah, that's up to you. And towards the end, I just want to request my brothers and sisters who are listening to me right now, and this is something really important that I want all of us to understand, that the reason I've given all the opinions from different school of thoughts is because I want people to understand that, there are differences of opinion on certain matters, and it's okay to have different opinions on certain matters. There was a story that my teacher told me that stayed with me for a very long period of time, and that was the story of a frog that lived in a well. And one day there is another frog from outside of the well, and he lands into that well. So the frog from the well, he asks the frog from the outside that, where do you come from? So he says, I come from this pond, and it's a very vast space and there's a lot of vegetation, there are different kinds of creatures there. But this frog who lived his entire life in the well, his reality, his existence was this well. That's all he knew. That's all his reality was. So he said to the other frog, he asked the other frog, is your pond, is your place is bigger than my place? Is it bigger than my well? And he said, yeah, it's bigger than your well. And then he kicked one wall and he said, is it bigger than this wall? And he said, yeah, it's bigger than this wall. And eventually he kicked all four walls and he asked him, is it bigger than all these four walls? And he said, yeah, it's bigger than all of these four walls. But at that point he said, no, I don't agree with you, and I cannot accept the fact that the place where you come from is bigger than my place. Because he lived his entire life in that well. His existence was that well. His reality was that well. And for him to understand something that is outside of that well, that he never knew, that was larger than his well, that was bigger than his well, but he has never seen it, he has never known about it, it was difficult for him to comprehend it. It was difficult for him to know about it. What I'm trying to say is that sometimes, the environment that we come from, the way we have been taught about Islam, about our religion, because of our culture, sometimes we restrict the understanding of Islam to this amount. We restrict Islam to this amount. Whereas when you start learning about Islam, when you start educating yourself, you realize and you find out there's so much more. Over the years, as I have studied Islam, I've realized, oh, mashallah, there is this opinion, and there is this opinion, and there is this opinion. There's so much vastness, and there's so much relaxation in our religion. So what happens because of that is you become more tolerant, and you become less judgmental about position, even if they are about other people, even if they are following a position that you don't agree with, as far as it's a valid position, alhamdulillah, it's fine. You guys need to understand that the difference of opinion has always existed, and it will always exist. Sahaba differed on some issues with each other. There's 4 schools of Sunni Islamic law, they differed with each other on some issues, and there is going to be a difference of opinion. It will always, it's how you deal with those differences of opinion. So if we learn to be respectful towards each other, and if we understand that, you're following a position that I don't understand and I don't agree with, but alhamdulillah, I understand that the position that you are following, it's within the premises of Sharia, and I'm comfortable with the position that I'm following. If we are able to develop that, inshallah, we will have more unity and more cohesiveness in our society, inshallah. So I will conclude my today's discussion on that. Whatever position you follow, as long as you are within the premises of Sharia, and as long as you stay consistent with that position. It's not like you choose Imam Malik's position today and tomorrow, because Imam Ahmad Hanbal's position suits you more, you choose Imam Ahmad. No, you remain consistent. You don't pick and choose. You don't do fatwa shopping. As long as you remain consistent with that position, alhamdulillah, that's fine. And inshallah, alhamdulillah, because of this, there is a khair in that. Inshallah, we'll get the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant understanding. For the next 2 nights, inshallah, we will be talking about the history of Taraweeh prayers. Since we are on the topic of Taraweeh prayers, I want to introduce you how Taraweeh prayers started, what's the history behind it. And inshallah, we will keep doing that until Monday. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.